Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. I'm your host, Al Richards. We have a real special guest with us, and I know you guys hear me say that every week, and it's true. Every week we have very special people on the show. That's how I see them, anyway. I had the honor of going to a ribbon cutting, I guess about a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, for Fit to Recover. These guys are doing a phenomenal job. They are actually opened up another facility, which is bigger. To see the turnout that was there, I mean, I've got goosebumps already. It was just amazing. Well, guess who was there to say a few words? It was the Salt Lake City Mayor, Erin Mendenhall, and that's who's with us today. So, Mayor, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for inviting me to be on your podcast.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for accepting, because after you got done talking, after they got done doing their thing, my wife was with me, and I says, I'm going to go hit up the mayor. And she's like, are you serious? I'm like, she could either say yes or no. Those are the only two things she can say. So, yeah, I'm going to go talk to the mayor. And so thank you for even taking time to chat with me. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of get at a longer format conversation on what is such a complicated issue at its heart. And which at a city and a policy level, from a general public standpoint, can be glossed over as, something we need to, quote, just fix. So
yeah,
it's not that simple.
It's not. And that's what I'm finding out. It's really not that simple. And, and before the show, you and I were chatting about a few things. And there's some things that are not really in your playground, right? Because of just the position that you're in. You're not in the position to, I guess, jump in the other playground or
cities have a certain lane.
Yeah, right. But there are some things too that I think are very important to talk about. And I believe you have a lot of support on this area, and that's the mental health stuff, right? Because there are a lot of people downtown who are living on the streets. I just found out from you, Sarah, speaking with them, that we do not want to call them homeless anymore. We just want to say that they're unsheltered. And I heard that with the gentleman that was speaking at the Other Side Village groundbreaking yesterday. He said,
Wayne Niederhauser.
Yeah, Wayne. He talked about how they're unsheltered, which I love how the words have changed with that, right? There's a lot of people suffering, and we really don't have places for them to go, right? And people don't quite understand.
Yeah. What I'll term as homelessness, and Wayne's title at the state is homeless coordinator, and
okay.
And at the city, I think we're still we're working with. I think our language is important. So, in that universal realm of unshelteredness and the experience of it. Do you mind if I just jump in?
No, go for it. Yeah, please.
Because I think just to set up a little context for it.
Okay.
Here in the state of Utah, the last numbers that the state had, which we're anticipating the newer point in time count numbers from just January to come in the next few weeks or month or so. But the most recent numbers before that were that there's about 700 people in the state of Utah who don't fit into the system. Meaning that on a cold January night, when every bed is accounted for from shelter to motel vouchers, there's about 700 people who there's nothing for. And of those 700, about 400 at that time were in Salt Lake County. Now, that number this year is at least up around 530. But relative to our surrounding neighbor states, Idaho, at that same point in time count, had about 1,100 who don't fit in the system.
Goodness.
Yeah. Colorado, over 3,000. Nevada as well. Arizona's around 4,500. And of course, then you get to California and 160,000 people. So we have a relatively small population. And I say this because we should not be intimidated by the numbers of people who need help and who are not fitting into the system as it's built today. We're the strongest economy in the nation for 15 years running, the state of Utah. Our legislature just wrapped up with $1 billion surplus in their budget. when they started. So we should not be intimidated, and we also shouldn't be intimidated by the reality of the fact that homelessness is as complex as each individual who experiences it. There is no single solution. Okay, so with that as context, the homeless services system, as it's called still today in Utah, serves about 65-70% of the population really well, in that about that percentage of the people who come into the system in a year resolve, get into housing, and are no longer a part of the system. So they touch in, they get the resources they need. Maybe that's emergency shelter. It's probably a number of other financial resources, gets stabilized, and it's resolved, so to speak. That's a pretty successful system, but for the 30% or so who it's not working for, and which number is reflected in those numbers I told you a moment ago, it's really not working. And this is not only the system of shelter beds, this is the system of housing in the state of Utah, and it is the system as well of mental and behavioral health services and needs of real people, which has been a gaping hole in America, particularly since the pretty significant shift that happened with President Reagan of undoing the mental health hospital system, and again, for good reasons. Talk about a broken system, but that was failed to be replaced at a local level by more direct, what was intended to be a direct access at a community level, so someone could live in their community and manage their mental illness with assistance. It didn't happen. So cities around the country have been struggling to knit together, or not, as in has been the case in Utah for too long, a real support network for that 30% or so. Now, not everyone, of course, that's on the street has mental illness.
Right.
But in the chronically homeless population, there is a higher degree of people suffering from mental illness. And along with that, at times, self-medication because of the lack of resources to manage what they actually need.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess that's where I'd like to throw out, our friends over at the Other Side Academy with what they're doing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I saw you yesterday. You got up and spoke at the groundbreaking for the Other Side Village. And I don't remember the exact number. Wasn't it like 160 homes or something like that they're going to be?
There will be 60 in phase one.
Phase one, okay.
And there's up to 400 in their complete build out. Yeah, it's
Wow.
phenomenal.
I'll say it. And there were people up there on the front row, correct, that I guess have qualified residents,
Yeah.
that they're going to be some of the first ones to be living
Yeah,
in there.
they're the villagers.
Wow.
And I've had the great privilege to get to know several of them, and we spent Thanksgiving together a couple of months ago. They're just heroes to me.
Yeah.
Their courage and tenacity and their love and compassion for the community and for themselves is really remarkable. And the Other Side Academy breeds that.
Yeah.
And now they're building that kind of a culture into what will be the Other Side Village. There's a Venn diagram, Al, of those populations, that a lot of the people I've met at the Other Side Academy have lived unsheltered at some times in their lives. But it's not necessarily the population that the Other Side Village aims to serve, which is specific to the chronically homeless, which is a federal legal term, very acutely defined about what it means to be, quote, chronically homeless. But that's what we as the city have funded through our land, their ability to build the village on our land, so with the condition basically that they focus in and prioritize Salt Lake City's currently unsheltered folks.
Wow. And thank you for the numbers. I mean, because when you hear about where ours is at, where a lot of people would say, oh my gosh, that's bad. And it is high, but not as bad as our surrounding states. So.
I think context matters. It matters also to consider that we're the fastest growing population in the nation, the state of Utah, by more than a full percentage point over the next fastest growing, which is Idaho, actually, at this point. And I've been in City Hall, this is my 10th year in City Hall, 6 years as a councilwoman. I'm in my 4th year as mayor, and we've been grappling with how do we serve our residents who are unsheltered in a better way every day of every week of every month of every year that I've been there. And it's changing. And so not only do I think it's important that we have an actual sense from a numbers perspective of what are quantifiably, how many people are we trying to work with, but also it's important to me that Utahns and Salt Lakers understand that the system is not the same as it was even just a couple of years ago here in the state of Utah. There's been a pretty dramatic shift that I don't think the public is really aware of, and it is a shift for the good. It's a big shift of progress that has brought the state into a far more engaged and I think responsible role, as they should be, for what is truly a statewide issue. It's an issue of not enough affordable housing in communities throughout the state, and it's an issue that results in communities shifting their residents who become unsheltered into 2 or 3 cities in the state, which is Ogden, Salt Lake City, and St. George primarily. Can I talk about affordable housing for a minute?
Absolutely. Hey, like I told you at this beginning, this is your show. So yeah, let's throw it out there, because I really do believe our listeners need to know, right? People need to know this information.
Well, I think your listeners, I'm making an assumption here, but I'm not going to blow their minds by saying that things happen in life. It's not a straight line.
No.
And whether it's mental health needs that came up as part of growing up, or you were born with mental health needs, trauma, physical illness, job loss, accident, divorce, I mean, you name it. Stuff hits the fan. And if you're living in a community in the state of Utah that has actually never allowed or even zoned for affordable housing to happen until the last couple of years when the state got insistent about it, and you hit an obstacle like that and your housing's compromised, you lose your housing, there may be nowhere to go in your community. And I've had mayors and council people across the state of Utah look me in the eye for years and say, if we see someone experiencing homelessness in our city, we put them in the back of the cop car and we drop them off in Salt Lake. And they mean it from a compassionate way, I think.
You think? Okay.
I think because there's a concentration of services in our city, and they don't know how to help. If they don't have services and they don't have permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, really, I think communities in those parts of the state don't know what to do but to move their residents out. And that's a reality that more Utahns need to get their head around. That is the reality.
Yeah.
And it's shifting with the state coming into the conversation in a bigger way, both with funding and from a policy perspective.
I'm grateful that someone is seeing it, right?
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
I'm grateful it's happening.
Right. And things don't happen overnight. It definitely takes some time, because us on the outside of all this stuff that's going on, we don't see all the hoops and the moguls that you guys have to go through, cutting through probably a lot of red tape and different things that we know nothing about, right? That's like I've shared before. It's like my wife when she was in the depths of her addiction. You know, she told me once that she wished I'd be her husband instead of her therapist, because I thought I understood addiction. I don't understand it, and I don't understand that part, because I mean I can't say I've been homeless when I lost my job of 24 years because of my own doing. You know, my wife and I didn't have anywhere to go. We lost our house a year later, and we just luckily had friends that opened up their arms and said, here, you can come and stay in our basement, you know, and it took us a couple years to get back on our feet, to get things going. So there's a lot of people that have it out there a lot worse.
Yeah. And what you said reminds me of something our friend Joseph Grenny at the Other Side Academy often says, which is that homelessness is a catastrophic loss of community.
Yeah.
And thank goodness for you and your wife to have friends who were there when you needed that. But the reality of a lot of families and communities in America is that it doesn't exist.
Do you guys foresee the word getting out that Salt Lake City is doing this amazing stuff for the unsheltered?
I know where you're going.
Right? I bet you do. I bet you do. You're reading my mind, I bet. And that, so people from like other states, Idaho, Colorado, are going to go, let's go there.
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot. And over the many years that I've been studying this from a policy perspective, we've traveled around different cities in the country, Portland, Seattle, Chicago, parts of the Southwest, and visited resource centers, day centers, youth facilities, housing projects that are specific to people with alcoholism in the midst of their addictions. Really unique approaches happening around the country. And everywhere I've gone, when we're visiting a service provider, inevitably somebody says, "Oh, everybody from Salt Lake comes here." And they'll sometimes say, "Hey, Joe, where are you from?" He'll say, "Oh, Salt Lake City." They'll, See, you're shipping all your people here. No one is shipping. There is no shipping.
There is no shipping. All right.
No,
Good
I
to
mean,
know.
at least from our city perspective. But you may remember late last year, there was some news buzz locally here about Jackson Hole reportedly sending people experiencing homelessness on a one-way bus ticket to Salt Lake City.
I didn't hear about it because we don't watch the news
That
at
is
our
really
house. So
smart
yeah.
in some way.
Yeah, so I don't have a clue. Yeah.
But it was not only irritating to me at the city level, but a lot of people in the community were offended that one of the wealthiest counties in America might be doing that. Whether or not it's true and what their system is beyond, I think, the scope of our podcast today. But these are the kind of stories that are always going around. And so, but I would say to your question directly, that is not a reason for us not to improve what is a broken system.
Right.
And there are things that we can do in terms of prioritizing access to housing in particular, or certain programs or things, which, let me give a disclaimer, the city doesn't run any of that. We may contribute financially, we may work with zoning as we did with the Other Side Village to allow things to happen, but we don't run anything whatsoever in terms of homeless services, winter shelter, mental health or behavioral health programming. By the way, the county runs mental and behavioral health programming. Cities don't receive $1 for that.
Okay.
So the relationship is pretty entwined. But we should be doing this. That is the right thing to do. And no matter what those numbers are, if it's more than one who doesn't fit into the system, then we have to be improving it. And I hope that, as difficult as it is, and you may know this from your own relationships and conversations, to define residency. If someone has been living unsheltered for some long amount of time, they may have moved around different parts of the city, the county, the state. They may have couch surfed a little bit. They could have been housed for a short time and come back into living unsheltered. It's complicated. And so even making a definitive declaration about where someone is, quote, from is really hard to do. But it's still something that the homeless management system, HIMIS, Homeless Information Management System, which collects the data at the shelters and through the point in time count, etc., is trying to help us get a grapple of when did you arrive here and how long have you been here. And prioritizing access may be one of those ways to make sure that we don't just become a magnet for other states who should be doing more.
Yeah, because I kind of picture that in the back of my head of just they're like, well, Salt Lake's taking care of them, so let's kind of push them towards that direction, right?
There's definitely some accountability that is needed.
You know, I wouldn't want to be in your guys' shoes. That's for sure. She didn't see, so that's a good thing.
Sorry.
It was
good. Dropping.
It was drooping.
It was in my lap. There we go.
It's all good.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to be in your guys' shoes at all to want to make so many different decisions, but I have to tip my hat off to you. I mean, seriously, for seeing something that needs to change, because you've said it a couple times during this interview. They're people, right?
Yeah.
Just like everyone that's sitting here in this studio.
Yeah.
There's someone that loves them. There's someone that cares about them. You also brought up just with the mental illness, the trauma, and there's so many things. Like you said, life has a way of punching us in the gut as often as it possibly can. Some of us make the right choices. A lot of us don't. That's part of growing. That's part of becoming stronger. That's how I just kind of see it. I really don't think the majority of the community out there really understands a lot of that, right? And I'm just as guilty. I've been one that have driven downtown, seen people living under tarps and things, and it's like, get your act together. You know, go do something. Give back to community, the community. And when I've now put myself the last 2 years under this addiction umbrella, I get emotional talking about it because I have learned so much. And we've interviewed 140 something people we've got interviewed people from the UK and Canada and all over the United States. And you hear their stories and you're going, for me, I'm going, man, I've been looking at this the wrong way for so long.
Can I tell you the moment for me when
Please.
I realized how close, what a small degree of separation that life could be for me. I was a new council person. It was the year 2014, and I represented most of State Street while I served on the city council, so 9th South to 21st South. And there's a lot going on State Street for decades and decades. And as an aside, I think every capital city has a State Street, so to speak, maybe named something else. But where, especially here's the crossroads of the West, where I-15 and I-80 come through, car travel really popular in the 50s, 60s, 40s even. Motels are built for road travelers, people coming through. And these motels over the decades fall into disrepair. People aren't quite traveling the same. There's different ways we stay places. And not unique, Salt Lake City to the rest of the country, our State Street's full of what ends up becoming, in a housing market that doesn't have enough accessible housing, the short-term only housing option for people coming out of incarceration, for people in 24-hour cycles of with behavioral health needs. And we had a conversation before this, you and I, Al, about some of the barriers to accessing jobs and housing options and things that exist for people with a criminal record, et cetera. All of those exist. And if you're just getting out of jail, or you have a record that's going to make it hard for an apartment application to say yes to you, you might end up spending a lot of money, $90 a night, sleeping in a motel on State Street.
Yeah.
And that's been there for a very long time. And it creates this ecosystem of commerce of a sort that keeps going on a 24-hour cycle. And for me, sorry for the long intro there,
No,
I went
it's all
out
good.
with a patrol officer for a part of a shift, just to kind of see what's going on and see it through our Salt Lake City Police Department's experience. And we pull up on Major Street and happen to interrupt, as we turn the corner, interrupt a John picking up a woman. She's still standing on the sidewalk. The John speeds off, And the officer says, let's get out and talk to her. And I was kind of nervous. She didn't seem like she wanted to talk with us. And the officer was a really kind and gentle approach to her. Hey, I'm not here to arrest you. I just want to talk to you and see if you need anything. How are you doing? Are you doing okay? And she started talking to us. We come to find out she and I are the same age. I didn't tell her, she was doing the talking at this point.
Yeah.
We're the same age, grew up in sort of the same area. She told us through tears how she has 2 kids she hasn't seen because of her addiction. They're living with her parents here in the valley. She hasn't seen them. She's crying. I have 2 kids at home at the same time. I start to see the similarities in our lives and the trajectories. And she talked a little bit about some of the decisions she made and also some of the things that happened to her, some of the traumas that happened, and how she couldn't do that sex work without being high. And there was a sort of an inverse, a terrible cycle that she was in there, waking up, needing to eat, needing a fix, and then needing to pay for her motel room that night, or figuring out somewhere else to sleep on the street, and then waking up and doing it again. And by the end of our time standing on the sidewalk with her, I realized how ignorant I'd been about the possibility of finding yourself in the throes of addiction and in a place you never imagined yourself being. And it's changed my life, my view on my fellow human beings.
Yeah.
Trying to find joy in a day, trying to do our best, but being human beings, and realizing that you don't know what life's going to throw at you.
No. Thank you for sharing that. I think both of us have gotten some tears in our eyes because it could happen to us just as easy as it happened to them, right? And I was ignorant as well. Some of the stories that I've heard, I've got to know people like January who does the, you probably know January with all the awesome work she's done. All the people from USARA and the Other Side Academy and Red Barn, and Farmington
and Fit to Recover.
There's so many. And when you sit down and you talk with these people and you hear their stories, there's times I've scratched my head going, man, if that happened to me, I'd probably be in the same boat that they're in. And again, that's one of our missions here on this show. We want to get rid of that stigma. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's just like all the stuff that you're working on, right? It takes some baby steps to really get things going. And we want to help make that change as well, because people need to recognize it. They need to quit closing their eyes. They need to quit ignoring it. Something needs to happen. And it's going to take a plethora of us to make that happen.
I think the way you're doing it with the human to human, real, authentic conversation is the most convincing. It's the most heartfelt way to go about it. And one way that I've thought about it as a Utahn, we have big hearts. We have a lot of charitable giving, highest state in the nation for volunteerism, and we have a lot of good parts of the system, so to speak, that are targeted at children and helping kids who are in unhealthy or unsafe situations at home to get whatever support they may need in that place, but also the kind of resources or mentorship to chart a different course than perhaps the one they're coming out of in their childhoods. And yet there is this painful separation, I think, in our intellect, our communal intellect, about where we feel compassion and empathy for a young person who may have been dealt a really rough hand in life by the circumstances that they are raised in or things that happen. And then a place where that compassion and empathy really dissipates and maybe even vanishes. And that person who the system of services doesn't catch, which it absolutely can't catch and help everyone, that person grows up and they become an adult. And you might see them on the street. You might see them out there with a needle in their arm.
Yeah.
And we need, I implore us to think about the continuity of our compassion for our fellow human beings. That our systems, as well-intentioned as they may be, they don't help everyone. Some of them weren't designed actually to help everyone. And that's part of, I think, needing people in policy making and in decision-making roles who are fed up with not getting creative and tenacious about not just fixing what's broken, but building things new.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. And yeah, I think sometimes we screw up when we try to fix things. I think it's better just to wipe the slate clean and start from the beginning. So that's kind of my thoughts. But let's take a quick moment for a quick commercial break, and then we'll come back and we'll spend another 20 minutes or so and whatever else you want to talk about. I would like to also continue a little bit about just people not knowing, like the people that are unsheltered, what their lives have been like and growing up. Because like you said just a second ago, a lot of these people started out as a very young child, right? And they've buried it. But when they start getting into adulthood, it starts festering itself, and they do what they can to numb it. So, guys, stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hello, my friends. This is Brad Neufeld, and I want to thank you for tuning in to the Resilience Talk Network. You can listen to my show, Resilience, every morning, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. On my show, we will be discussing what it takes for you to overcome the day-to-day challenges that all of us face in life, as well as some of the devastating ones that may lead us to feelings of hopelessness and despair. It's my goal to provide you with the tools and skills that you need to overcome anything that is thrown your way. To find out more about my show, visit our website at www.resiliencetalk.com. That's www.resiliencetalk.com. And as always, until we meet again, go for everything that you want in life and make it happen.
Do you know someone who's gambling with death due to an addiction? Do you know someone whose life is being turned upside down due to a loved one that's battling with addiction? Hi, I'm Al Richards. I am the host of the Other Side of Addiction podcast. I started the podcast due to my wife's battle with alcohol. Let's just say I became addicted to her addiction. Our podcast is helping people understand a little more about those who have battled addiction and those who are hurting from their addiction. Through raw vulnerability, we share stories that help uncover the root causes of addiction. Shame felt on both sides, matter of the conscious and subconscious mind, continued beliefs, and often confusing paths of recovery. We collaborate with real people and their stories, as well as licensed professionals, to help our audience gain a better understanding of addiction. You can find us on Resilience Talk Network. You can also find us on Facebook at Mr. Al Richards. That's Facebook at Mr. Al Richards. You can also find us on YouTube. Just look up the Other Side of Addiction podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Other Side of Addiction, and we hope you guys really enjoyed the first half of the show. The information that Salt Lake City Mayor Erin Mendenhall shared, I think, was very valuable. So again, thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing what you shared. And I'm just going to say it again. Thank you for being such a huge supporter of the unsheltered and the addiction stuff, right? You talked about the story going out with the police officer, talking to a person who now I understand we're learning how to change our language even here on this show. Someone who's being trafficked. We're not using the P word anymore, basically. But and just seeing that how close to home it hit, really, right? Because you guys were about the same age, grew up almost in that same area. Gosh, just the stigma of things and doing our best to get society to change a little bit on how they look at things. And I really also believe that it would be good, and I know you guys don't have the schools and stuff are separate, but I really do believe, and I know this is probably such a touchy subject, especially with the way the world's going right now, it needs to be touched on, about addiction. Because as I was telling you during the break, a lot of our guests that have come on the show, their addiction started between 11 to 14 years old. About that time you're hitting puberty. Everything
people we
starts
know,
changing, right?
Anybody I know,
Yeah.
when I think about when their addiction started, most of them was in the teen years.
Yeah. And it's not all of us have that addiction mentality, I guess, I mean, gosh, I didn't even start smoking pot till 2 weeks before I graduated from high school, and then I went out and worked construction, and man, it was in construction everywhere. And this was back in the early 80s. I could have fallen anywhere like some of the people have done. I could have been that same victim. Why, I don't know. And I had some trauma in my life that I didn't even really start putting things together here till not too long ago, to be honest with you. And I'm like 3-4 months away from hitting 60, and it's taken me this much time to realize
It's
it.
still really courageous of you to do it.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I have to thank Dave DeRocher for that.
Oh,
I'm serious.
Dave's an angel.
So I'm going to share something real quick before we go. And I like to do this because he really opened my eyes. I had the honor to be on stage with Dave last year at Dixie Convention Center in St. George last August. We did this thing called the Healing Utah Success Summit. We're holding our second one here on April 15th at the Miller Free Enterprise Building. Dave's a powerful speaker.
Oh, yeah.
He's got a powerful story. So I remember after our event, I went up to him and I said, Dave, when you have some time when we get back home, I would really love to sit down with you and talk to you a little bit. And he goes, okay. Well, umpteen months later, because he's such a busy guy, he finally called me up. And Robin called me up and said, hey, Dave wants to meet with you. So it's on a Thursday. I decide to go meet with him before our morning show. Go in there. Dave comes in. I'm already speaking with Robin. And he says, so why did you want to speak with me? I said, I want your input. You're such a powerful speaker. I'm like, this is how I want to be on stage. I want to take some lessons from a guy that I admire, look up to. And he goes, will you allow me to be open? I allowed him to be open.
Dave's good at asking for permission.
Right? Yeah, which is cool. And he let me have it. Now, not in a mean or ignorant or very forceful way, but he really opened my eyes. And he told me, he says, Al, if you start sharing your story instead of sharing your wife's story, you'll be more powerful. And it just so happened to be that day, Robin was a guest co-host. Our guest didn't show.
Oh,
Robin's like, what do you want to do?
tables turned.
And I said, you want to interview me? And I shared my story for the first time. And my wife happened to come in. And she was just, I remember seeing the look on her face as she come in, and she's like,
What's going on?
oh my gosh, he's sharing his story.
Wow.
I can't believe he's doing that, right? So again, I have to thank Dave for that, because he really opened my eyes, and literally it took a lot of weight off my shoulders that I didn't even realize I was carrying. Again, people don't know what's happening to someone else.
And when it looks painful and difficult, there's a human instinct to distance ourselves from even relating to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I have 3 children, and as in my role, in my job, I get all the bad news that happens in the city texted to me immediately
Oh, I bet.
as it's unfolding. And there's a lot of tragedy and loss, almost on a daily basis in a capital city. And you realize how there's a couple of ways you can process something. You can process it intellectually and just keep it up in your head, or you can take it down into your heart and relate to it as a human. And as a mother, when hard things happen and tragedies happen to children in the community, you can't help but have your heart break with that family. And it would be probably more convenient functionally to wall that off and stay intellectual about it and separated, but I could not function. As the mayor, I couldn't go to sleep at night if I walled off my heart from my job. And it is hard. I mean, what I mean about it is the day-to-day real life management of a capital city challenges from a human perspective. There is nuance, there's individual challenges, there's, like you said, the background of individuals that we may never know the story of, but that are absolutely at play in any given interaction. And keeping your heart in the work, in your work as well, sitting in this room with the microphone. Without it, you're just spewing data and telling someone else's story. I remember thinking when people encouraged me to run for office that there was no way I could be elected, because I didn't see people that I felt an alignment in terms of appearance, age, income, education level, sort of social status. I was 32, didn't have any money. My friends didn't have any money. I have a big tattoo on my shoulder and have salty language sometimes. Didn't have a graduate degree and didn't serve on boards. But connecting on a human-to-human basis, knocking on doors, listening, really listening, turns out that's pretty electable at a city council level if you're willing to do the work.
Yeah.
And I think I thought that if I was able to get to a place of being on a legislative body as a city council is, or while being the mayor, that I would have to change somehow. And I was really committed that I couldn't do that. But I didn't know if I could actually do this job with my heart right here next to my intellect. And that's probably one of the greatest surprises of my work, is that actually it works very well. And I can sleep at night because of it.
Yeah, you can sleep at night because you are looking at people. That's exactly what they are, as people, right? They're not a piece of trash being thrown off to the side.
Yeah.
And there's too many people out there, not everyone, but there are too many people out there that just want to do that. They're not trash. They're human beings. So.
And we could talk about the day-to-day work around encampments too, and the abatements that the county health department does with our police department to close camps when they become unsanitary from human waste and needles, and have to be cleaned by the health department. That is not a pretty business, of people having to pick up everything that they own and move so that a space can be cleaned, and it can and yet I don't believe that leaving people to wallow in unsafe circumstances is the better situation. Now, how it happens is the important context. But it's difficult. It's difficult work. And I listen to and I lean on the conversations with individuals who have lived experience, some of which I've talked to through the Other Side Academy too, with individuals. There's an individual yesterday who's in the Other Side Academy right now as a student, who was at that groundbreaking for the Other Side Village yesterday, who shared this morning that that's where he lived, next to a tree at the back of the property.
Oh my gosh, seriously.
Burning wood chips from the wood chip pile that was there, in the throes of his addiction. And now the village is building housing there. I mean,
I got goosebumps.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, me too.
Wow.
But the listening to those friends and people that I've learned from about what do people need in order to be supported in their mental and behavioral health needs, and possibly, hopefully, transition into a more stable environment. And time and again, it's that their boundaries are important, and permissions to continue in a way that is unsafe for themselves and everyone in the community is not a productive path.
Yeah.
So what that balance is of giving support in the moment and also making a pathway possible to get off of the street, that's our day-to-day work.
And like you said, Mayor, there's Utah, they are very thoughtful people. They're very giving people, and so I'm sure the more that you guys are getting out there and you're sharing this message and reaching out, I think you'll start seeing more and more people coming together to help out.
I hope so. It takes a village.
It does, right? It does take a village. We've been very blessed here. When we first started doing this show, I had a gentleman who knew Brad, who is the owner of Resilience. And, when we first started doing this show, you should go back and look at our first episodes. We basically had a sheet behind us and we're just one camera, and I just started reaching out to people with me doing a lot of networking through chambers and different things like that. I got to know a lot of people. And I remember the first business I went to, and I said, look, I want to start this podcast about addiction. And matter of fact, it's Steve, the owner of High Point Coffee in West Jordan off 7800 South and Redwood Road. Steve Wright, phenomenal gentleman. And he says, I just don't have the money to get started, but I found this guy that's going to open up a studio, but I got to find some sponsors. And we talked for about 2 hours, and I remember he goes, how much do you need to get started? And I told him. He goes, come back in 2 days and I'll have a check for you. And I was like, are you serious? And I remember calling Brad as soon as I left the coffee shop, and I'm like, we just got our first sponsor. He goes, the first thing that came out of Brad's mouth was, what day you want to record? And here we are 2 years now. March is our second year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And it's just been cool. And I've reached out to so many people. All this, I get emotional talking about it, because all this is because of them. It's because people are believing in what we are doing here. And our shows have been getting better. The quality's been getting better. Sylvia, who's behind the scene over here, she's been helping me become a better host. And it's easy for our ego to step in. I remember when she was first talking, I'm like, I've been doing this for a year and a half. I know what I'm doing. And then I finally had to go, whoa, wait a minute. Just go back. They're here to help. This is my goal, is to be better. I want this podcast to be the #1 podcast here in Salt Lake when it comes to understanding addiction. I got to listen to people. I got to pay attention. I'm not any better. I'm still the same me, but I'm growing, right? And we like the rawness. Our shows are raw. They're not script, right? I didn't send you an email and say, here's 10 questions. And say, here's 10 questions, answer them. So this is how I'm going to... And I get a lot of people that reach out to me, and they actually thank us. It's like, thank you for having it so raw. You can see the people are very vulnerable. They're reaching out and they see it. Sometimes we get a little heated, not where we're yelling or screaming, but it's because of our passion. Mm-hmm. And there's many, many times here, all of us have got tears in our eyes, because you're hearing what's happened with someone's life. And I share my stories. I get just as vulnerable as our guests do. And I think it's very powerful. It's using our voices, and you've kind of said it in some different ways throughout this interview. Using our voices is so powerful.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
very, very powerful.
Yeah, and I think at the same time, it's powerful to remind someone or invite someone that their voice is so necessary and wanted and valid. That's we shouldn't take that for granted.
Mm-hmm.
The power of invitation and of recognition, of seeing someone, hearing someone,
Yeah.
holding that space. It's very, I mean, it's whether you're 5 years old or 85 years old, we all need that. No matter where we are, hosting a successful, nearly #1 podcast in the city, or
We'll be there.
yeah, we
Yeah.
all need that. Thanks for making a space like this for people to
Oh, absolutely.
share for the good of everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for your time, Mayor. I really do appreciate
It's been
it.
a pleasure.
And, you know, whenever I go to these other events and different things, it's, you know, it was really cool to hear your name, and you got up and spoke yesterday. I'm like, oh, man, there she is again. You know, she's out here supporting a community that needs support. Right. And I hope the day comes in the near future where we have more facilities that open up to give people the help that they need, because not everyone has insurance.
Yeah.
And I want our listeners to understand, there are some really, really good recovery centers here, but there's also some, this is just me, that I think are just there for the money, not the individuals. More places need to open up, like the Other Side Academy, like the Red Barn, like, oh my gosh, I forgot their name, Navasu in Tooele, where they are just Medicaid only, and they help a lot of the American Indians, and, you know, places where people can go, because I know with a lot of the people that I've interviewed said, man, I was looking for help for years, just there's nowhere to go.
Mm-hmm. And until we get to that other part of the conversation where we can engage our youth in a more realistic and authentic conversation around the realities of addiction and that question mark that exists for all of us, and for some with families with histories of addiction, it's a very small question mark of whether or not it's there. But until we can start to intercede with our youth in a bigger way, we do need more facilities.
Yeah. That, and I'm a true believer now that I believe it should be mandatory that when someone goes through recovery, the family goes through a recovery. Because I have heard that there's an 80% chance that the person that's in recovery has an 80% chance of going into long-term recovery when the family understands it as well.
Maybe that's your
I would like
next
to see it
piece of work.
mandatory, right? Well, I did go to a 2-hour class at USAR to see about going up and talking at the Hill about our system is broken. So, because I think some things need to be changed. But again, Mayor, thank you so much. I don't want to take any more of your time. I know you're a busy lady. You probably got a lot going on, plus you're a mom as well. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. I really, really do appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. I really
Absolutely.
enjoyed it.
Good. I hope you did. So, guys, awesome show again. I haven't used this word for a long time because my wife kept making fun of me, but I'm just going to use it today. This was a phenomenal show. See, and just a lot of great information. So we really do appreciate Mayor Mendenhall for being here and sharing her knowledge and everything that she's doing to help our community become a better community. And we just want to say thank you again to all our listeners, all our guests co-hosts, all our sponsors, Resilience Talk Network, everyone behind the scenes. We got Mason and Sylvia here today. Brad's busy working. Just thank y'all. Greatly appreciate it. And we're going to leave you with this as we do. Oh, before I go, say my little final words here, guys. Mark your calendars, April 15th. It's a Saturday at the Miller Free Enterprise Building in Sandy from 11 to 4:30. The Healing Utah Success Summit. I'll be speaking. Our good friend Mallory Roosh, who has been a guest on the show, has a killer book called Inspired to Recover. You'll definitely want to have your little tissues ready when she gets up and speak, because she'll definitely have you crying. And then our own Brad Neufeld will be getting up and speaking too. So please mark your calendars. You can go to rushrecovery.com to get your tickets. That's RUESH recovery.com. It's only $35, plus we're offering lunch from Apple Spice Junction. That's an extra $12 if you guys want a lunch. So please come out and support us and come and be inspired. Guys, remember, addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything.